Stone face. He's no longer a handsome one. If indeed it ever was.
There is a lot to love about House of the Dragon, and what stood out to me the most was the consistency and nuance of the acting, with Emma Darcy, Matt Smith, and Olivia Cooke all giving exemplary performances, rivaling even the best of its predecessor series.
But now they see you as you are.
But to me, it was King Viserys and the performance of Paddy Considine that was truly the highlight of the show, and maybe my favorite fantasy performance ever, despite really having every right not to be. You see, Viserys isn't really a large part of the source material that the show is based on, George R. R. Martin's Fire and Blood. His character is portrayed mostly through historical accounts, which obviously do not explore his inner conflict whatsoever. In the book, Viserys is characterized by his generosity and indecisiveness, both of which shouldn't really translate into a captivating TV character. Nonetheless, these are some of the defining characteristics brought to the show, favoring diplomacy and stability over conflict, and demonstrating a tendency to avoid difficult decisions and restrict Rhaenyra, Daemon, and Alicent, the other more traditionally fun main characters whose storylines would be in theory more exciting without him. He's, on the surface, a very passive character.
There are times when I would rather face the Black Dread himself than mine own daughter of 15.
Another thing to note, within the context of the Game of Thrones television universe, when we look at all the most well-received and memorable characters and performances, both by fans and critics, these being Cersei, Kingslayer, Daemon, Joffrey, Tyrion, Daenerys, Arya, Oberyn, they're all kind of fucked up people. Some more than others.
I want these people executed!
They want the same for you!
But Viserys is a good guy. Mostly. Not a great king when looking at the consequences of his rule, but looking at his portrayal in the series, he is a mostly noble, understanding, warm, thoughtful, and fair ruler, a keeper of the peace through and through, someone who has to deal with all his family's bullshit as well as his body utterly deteriorating, and he still remains a good guy. And it's not as entertaining to be the good guy, and not just the good guy as in this is the character we're still kind of rooting for, but a good guy. This isn't Walter White, Tony Soprano, or the aforementioned Tyrion Lannister or Daenerys. He's not an anti-hero. And I say that not to undermine the character itself or suggest that King Viserys is underwritten, but to argue that it's undeniably true that without the obvious anti-hero qualities, it's harder to make the performance memorable. This may be the reason why in the beginning of the show, many viewers thought the character was kind of boring. After all, he's not a demented king, or a virtuoso gladiator, or insanely attractive. So why is this character so unforgettable? Paddy Considine, of course, as well as the show's interpretation of the character, which, yeah, I think I should quickly talk about before Paddy.
I will not be made to choose between my brother and my daughter.
One of the big points I just brought up about the character of Viserys is his passive nature, which I need to clarify does not mean that he is any less important to the first season than the other more active, more obviously strong characters like Daemon or Rhaenyra. After all, it is this character trait itself, his passivity and the lack of action he takes, that leads to the Dance of the Dragons, with his death being the biggest turning point of the series thus far, and really what sets up the entire show. Even before his death in the civil war that follows, it is his own personal goal and struggle to just keep everything together that makes his central drama, the entire first season, so compelling. His naming of Rhaenyra as his heir is also what kicks off her own character journey, as she is given the burden of having to secure her claim to the throne. So yeah, very important character, and Paddy gets this too. I mean, just because you're playing a weak king doesn't mean you have to turn in a weak performance. And Paddy never does.
I'm not threatening you, mate. It's beyond fucking words. I watched over you when you were asleep, and I looked at your fucking neck, and I was that far away from slicing it.
Throughout his 25-year career, Paddy Considine has been known for his intense and deeply authentic characters, and in particular, characters who deal with quite a bit of emotional and physical pain. A returning soldier avenging the abuse of his brother in Dead Man's Shoes, a struggling Irish immigrant in America, a boxer suffering a severe brain injury in Journeyman. Even in Tyrannosaur, a movie he wrote and directed, his main character is an enraged and isolated widower, someone who, spoiler, opens the movie by literally kicking his own dog to death. His characters, they go through it. Perhaps this is why the show singled out Considine for this role, an alien king with too many issues to count. Considine is also one of the rare actors both proficient and prolific in both comedy and drama, so why not fantasy? In interviews and press for the show, it's easy to tell just how much Considine respected both the opportunity of the role as well as the character itself, who, as mentioned earlier, could be easy for an actor to overlook. Speaking to GQ, Considine states, "What I found really interesting about him was that he wasn't corrupted by power, he just wanted peace. He wanted people to be happy at the end of the day, but that makes him weak. So what would have made him more relatable? If he was a dictator? If he was a tyrant? Would that be more satisfying? It's not who he is." And of course, who he is was significantly determined by Considine himself, who had so much heart, inner conflict, and tragedy to the character.
Now make your apologies and show goodwill to one another. Your father, your grandsire, your king demands it!
One thing that I think Paddy and Paddy alone adds to this character is likability, which is so necessary here to balance out the flaws and polarizing decisions Viserys makes throughout the show. Viserys certainly had morals, especially compared to others on the show, but this is a guy who early in the show prioritizes his desire for a male heir over the health of his wife, and someone who marries Alicent despite her being both 18 and unable to say no. Granted, some of this is understood to be normal royal and societal behavior for the time and context, but it's something everyone watching knows is wrong. But despite all this, King Viserys becomes someone that we end up very much caring for, and that has so much to do with the empathy Considine brings to the character. And let's keep in mind, this is a fantasy performance. It's not the type of character or person you see every day on the street, or someone you can shadow or realistically study. And while I think the exact opposite, performers who play deeply researched and specific characters, perhaps real or contemporary people, is just as hard in different ways, as you have to convince people you are this person who they already feel like they know, and any lapse in believability will throw the whole film off. I also feel like it's just as hard to reach that emotional understanding that you need to turn in a believable performance for a completely fictional, otherworldly kind of character. Viserys is believable because of the humanity and vulnerability Considine brings to the performance, illustrating Viserys' internal struggles with his health and family, both in moments of outward passionate expression and restrained frustration, disappointment, and self-questioning. And his expressive moments aren't always the result of anger. Some of the best scenes in the early half of the first season are the ones shared with Rhaenyra, which highlight the most loving and convincingly loving relationship on the show. I love this moment in episode 2 where Viserys, after initially tearing into Rhaenyra for fleeing King's Landing without his word and protection, reflects on the shared grief between them following the death of his wife and Rhaenyra's mother, and apologizes for not having the right words to say after the loss.
I wish I had known better what to say to you in the aftermath. I struggled to realize that my daughter had so quickly become a woman grown.
I really think we need to appreciate Considine's line delivery here, especially considering the old English language usage of woman grown as opposed to our modern phrasing of grown woman. A lot of the time in Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon when they utilize this style of writing, it slightly throws me off, either because the actor delivers it too formally or its use seems arbitrary in a line, but it always feels right when Considine says it. And I can say that about all his lines in this performance, which each feels so authentic to where the character is at in his journey. Early in the show, his words feel very purposeful and dignified, confident even when the character is not, and easy to get out.
Then let us all consider your gold well invested, Lord Beesbury.
Contrast this to the way he talks to Rhaenyra and Daemon when they meet him at his deathbed, with every word coming out of his mouth, sounding and feeling like the hardest possible words to say, while still being incredibly loaded with mixed feelings of joy and sadness, as well as pride and shame.
Now that is a name fit for a king.
Throughout the show, I was continuously impressed by how Considine was able to slowly increase the raspiness and breathiness of his voice over time, in a way that never seems like it's doing too much or too little to convince you of Viserys' worsening health.
To trust a Martell is to be disappointed.
This scene in particular highlights Considine's mastery of his body to convey what his character is going through. He's not just pretending to be sick, he's showing a man clearly well on his decline, but still trying to seem like he's only got a little bit of a cold. And it's this physicality that really makes both the performance itself and the show work. After all, this is the portrayal of pretty much the entire adult life of a character whose physical decline and rotting flesh symbolizes the decline and ever-growing turmoil within his kingdom. Alongside the excellent hair and makeup department, who gradually altered his physical appearance literally episode to episode, sometimes scene to scene, Considine's performance of a man slowly dying is a true sign of an actor fully embodying the character that they are portraying. The slow, painful, but triumphant walk up to the throne to defend his daughter in episode 8 demonstrates Considine's mastery of movement. This is an over 2-minute long walking sequence where each step feels just as real and important as the last. Everything from the way he breathes and whimpers, to the way his fingers grasp the cane he's using, show an overwhelming attention to detail and focus on the present moment that you rarely see actors reach. And God, the way he sits on that chair, man, it's so impactful, somehow both heartbreaking and heartwarming at the same time. Reflecting on how his father looked when he died of cancer, Considine's final scenes as a frail and decayed King Viserys feel as informed, as realized, as any performer who isn't actually dying can be.
It didn't just remind me of him, I looked the image of my father when he died.
He also brought with him his mother, who, as Considine recalls, was ill his entire life from diabetes until her death in 2005.
Ultimately that's a tragic thing. I think my mum started to become her illness.
By his final episode, Considine has to act as a man more dead than alive, which is best shown in the Dragon family dinner scene, probably the standout moment of the show thus far.
It both gladdens my heart and fills me with sorrow.
No scene better exemplifies the tragic duality of this character, someone who seeks peace at all costs, but causes turmoil with every decision he makes. In a room divided, as many rooms have been during his reign, he must be a uniting force in his ugliest state. And for Considine, this means playing someone who has to display both strength and weakness simultaneously, which I believe is felt in every moment he is on screen, even the way he glances around the room. The moment he takes off his mask to reveal his decaying face is so powerful, and it's followed by among the best monologues in the show, a sad, beautiful swan song, a speech Considine delivers with an earnestness and sincerity that elevates every word to its maximum pathetical potential.
My subtext to that was just saying, look what this has done to me. This thing that you fight over, this seat that you all want, all this shit that you're bickering over, this is what it does.
I wish you to see me as I am. Not just a king, but your father, your brother, your husband, and your grandsire.
Despite critical acclaim, this performance got no major love, not just at the Emmys, but also not in any major award. His awards and nominations section as Wikipedia shows not a single nomination for the House of the Dragon, which is crazy considering that throughout pretty much the entirety of Thrones, if you were one of the main 20 performers on the show and you delivered a couple decent scenes, you got an acting award nom. It was a lock. Despite all this, sometime after the release of the show, it was reported, Considine gets a text from George R. R. Martin himself, reading, "Your Viserys is better than my Viserys." I guess that's some validation.
And for the sake of this old man, who loves you all so dearly.
Thanks for watching. This is Come Watch TV. I hope to see you all next time.